AI revolution, right? Over the course of the next 5 to probably 15 years. To your point earlier, right? There is going to be entire jobs that are either replaced or augmented by AI. What that will mean is it will give us an opportunity as a human race to find new ways, new problems that we can go solve, right? Because some of the problems that are maybe a little bit more fundamental, we've now created technology to help us solve those. It's all algorithms. It's just pattern recognition. And so what we have to do is get better at the pattern recognition in understanding that no technology is going to be perfect, but we have to start trying. Otherwise, we're going to be so far behind that the bad guys will forever stay ahead.
I am Augustin, the editor-in-chief of Cyber Express, and welcome to the show called the Security Pit. Firstly, congratulations for being one of the top 50 CISOs globally. So I think that's a good start. So could you just start us a little bit about your journey in cybersecurity?
Absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to be here first and foremost. So I really started cybersecurity when I was about 3 years old. I was very lucky in the 80s to have multiple computers in my house. My mom ran a secretarial service out of our house, and so I, at a very young age, was exposed to computers and had an opportunity to start tinkering very early on. And what I very quickly realized over time, right, was that I liked figuring out how to get around things, or figuring out how to get a computer to do something that maybe it wasn't supposed to do, right? I always, I definitely dabbled in the, we'll say, gray hat area of things. I don't think I did anything that was truly nefarious or illegal, especially since, at that point in time, there were no laws in cybersecurity. But once I got to an age where I could really start to pursue education, I took some basic, classes in, computer science, and it kind of continued towards a trend of security. Ended up getting an undergrad degree in information security, and started my career at MIT Lincoln Laboratories. Spent a bunch of time working on Department of Defense work there. Started out in audit, and then got into the management and accreditation of systems. From there, went on to work at a SaaS cybersecurity company called Veracode. Spent better part of a decade there, and got really cut my teeth in working with some of the largest companies in the world. Got to sit across the table from CISOs at Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies, and hear how they build security programs. And I was like, that's where I want to head. And that was a really affirming thing. I ended my career at Veracode as the CISO there, as well as interim CIO. So got the kind of the full responsibility of not just the security side, but also the data and systems side of things. And then left to come to NS1, where there was no security program. And I got to build it from the ground up. And that's been the last 3.5 years now, building it from the ground up. And it's been a heck of a journey.
Great. Prolific, if I may. That's
It's not often that I get to sit and kind of look back at the entirety of my career. But every step of the way, it's been one thing led to the next.
Great. Yeah. I mean, it was planned on for you, so I'm happy for you. Okay.
Thank you.
So another thing so the conversation right now is a lot about the hottest AI summer. So let's probably just get to that. you are a CISO and you've been interim CIO. You have been, you have been helping the departments. You have been helping the security infrastructure of companies, deciding the
Sure.
policies, drafting the budgets and things like that. And now there is also this entire threat of job loss about AI. A lot of people, even
Yeah.
I'm worried. Oh, AI is going to take away my job too, probably, or probably someone with AI. So here, how do you see the evolution of AI, and how will the CISO's role be changed? Now that you're
Sure.
yourself a CISO, how do you see AI being impactful in your life in the future?
Yeah. So I think AI is just like any other technology, right? When we had, the Industrial Revolution and, the advent of the internal combustion engine, right? That changed entire industries and how they operated. I think AI, will look back and we will have a similar, sentiment towards AI, right? There will be an AI revolution, maybe not one that's like Skynet, where the computers are taking over the world. But I think there will definitely be a fundamental shift in how we as a society, we as a human race, operate with AI. And I think it's one of those things where the technology is here, whether we choose to embrace it or not, right? And there will always be people who are going to use it to their own benefit, and maybe to the detriment of others, right? The example that I can think of kind of right off the top of my head is deep fakes, right? The ability
Yeah,
to go and create content that appears to be somebody else that's not real. So from where I sit in the security world, we can either choose to kind of reject it or embrace it, right? That's really the only two choices you have. And the more you try to deny that a technology exists, especially one that could be used for adversarial purposes, you're setting yourself up for failure. So what does that leave you with the decision? It's basically you need to figure out how to embrace it. People are going to if a developer can go and utilize Google to find a piece of code that helps them do their job, or that problem has already been solved, they're going to do it. Likewise, if there's an AI algorithm that allows them to say, here's my problem, now help me write the code to solve that problem, they're going to do it. Whether you permit it or not, they're going to do it. And so for me, security is, at the core of my job, it's risk mitigation, right? It is understanding what is the risk versus the reward. And it's a constant balance, right? There's not a single point in time where there's a 100% right answer. It's, well, here's the answer for today, right? And that answer might change tomorrow. And you have to be willing to kind of change. So right now, what we're doing and a lot of companies are doing is putting some guardrails in place and saying, listen, we know AI is here, we know that you're going to want to use it. Here's the guardrails, here's our expectations of how you can use this technology. We're fine with you going and using code snippets and things like that, or putting problem statements in, but we need to be making sure that we're not, stealing somebody else's intellectual property. And here's the process for reviewing that. And we need to be careful that we're not putting our intellectual property out there that might expose us, not only just from a intellectual property rights concern, but also like, oh well, now somebody might have a copy of our code, and if we haven't done our job, there could be a vulnerability in it. And now that's out there someplace. Is that Chat GPT, function that you just used, is that secure? Where's that data going? Right. So a lot of it, in my opinion, is creating a path for people to be successful that naturally follows human tendencies, right? If you say, you can't do this, you're not allowed to use it, people are going to be like, well, maybe if I just do a little bit, right? Maybe if I, like there's just a natural tendency. So I would far rather put a very clear path in place that allows them to utilize the technology, in this case, AI, that won't put us in an intrinsic greater risk.
Right. So you're an optimist.
I am, and I think there is always good to be derived from new technologies. There's bad, of course, as well, but I think this AI revolution, right, over the course of the next 5 to probably 15 years, to your point earlier, right, there is going to be entire jobs that are either replaced or augmented by AI. What that will mean is it will give us as an opportunity as a human race to find new ways, new problems that we can go solve, right? Because some of the problems that are maybe a little bit more fundamental, we've now created technology to help us solve those.
Right. But actually, okay. So another thing, and then of course, for that matter, you work with critical infrastructure, and then that is one area where there has actually been oversight, and then suddenly there's a lot of attention, and then there's a lot of back and forth. So could you just right now talk, just let me know your thoughts about the current protection measures that are being taken up by the critical infrastructure, and how can there be a lot of improvement in those spaces, especially
you're asking specifically in regard to AI?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, listen, the security has always been an afterthought, right? Up until really, I would argue, the last maybe decade or so, security was a nice to have, right? It was a benefit that, when you could afford it, you did it. Now it's a necessity, right? Who needs security? Everybody needs security. And government and regulators are now getting wise to that, right? And it's in multiple different facets, right? Of course, we have the GDPRs and the CCPAs and of the world that specifically focus on protection of humans and their personal data. But I think especially with the advent of AI, right, there has to be some deeper regulatory contemplation here, right? Because what does it mean if I can go and generate pictures of you, right? Am I allowed to use that? What does that mean to your identity as a person, right? So I think there's problems that regulation hasn't even contemplated yet, and we're going to run into some problems, right? If I can go and generate illicit content that has somebody else, as the focal point, have I committed a crime? Right? In some areas, they're starting to look at that. But I think critical infrastructure is another one of those areas where we haven't contemplated what AI means for critical infrastructure, right? It hasn't even really been thought through. And I think ChatGPT, even in the last 6 months, has just shown how quickly. I mean, my wife's a school teacher, and she was like, I had it write entire lesson plans for me. And like, that's hugely powerful, right? But now we know that there's fallacies in these algorithms, right? They're not perfect. And contemplate a society where a teacher is getting a lesson plan that's factually incorrect or is biased or skewed based on the data set that algorithm was trained off of. That's a scary proposition, right? Because now we're intrinsically trusting, right? It kind of makes me think back to in the late 90s, early 2000s with Wikipedia, right? Like it was, you had your encyclopedias and that was the trusted source. Well, then you had this open source, anybody can contribute to Wikipedia. And it was like, oh, well, we can't trust that because anybody can can edit it and contribute content. Well, just like any other technology, it took a little bit of time for people to understand, like, there is some governance around it. There's trusted editors. There's people who do fact checking. You have to have sources listed. But we don't have any of that yet for AI. And so I think what we're going to see is there's going to be more problems that we run into as a society as it pertains to AI. Critical infrastructure is going to be one of those that just happens to come up first because, well, it's critical infrastructure, right? And so, I think there's going to be a lot of places where industry has to set some standards and expectations well before government catches up, because government always tends to lag behind when it comes to regulation and kind of minimum standards, right? So I think industry will have to kind of set some agreed upon things like, here's what our expectation is as we incorporate AI. Here's what we believe are kind of the rules of the road operating standards. As it, if you're operating a power grid, are we going to accept AI, controlling the power grid? Maybe we are, maybe we aren't, but we probably should figure that out, right? So I think it's going to take a fair amount of, kind of industry expertise to understand where are the places that it's okay for us to leverage AI, and where are the places that us as humans don't intrinsically trust, a computer be making that decision.
Got it. So basically, the idea is that it's basically high time that government steps in and begins the regulation around AI. I think that's one of the important keynotes that even OpenAI is also speaking about it. That one of the reasons why they released it earlier is also because they want policies and people to come in, step in.
Yep. Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I think the CEO not too long ago testified before Congress, right? And here in the United States, and he said, many of those things, right? Like, we believe this needs regulation, right? And we want to be helping shape that conversation. But the concern that I have, right, is the politicians don't have any clue what they're talking about, right? And it was very clear, very clear. So I think, again, this is one of those places where industry is going to have to take the lead. Security professionals, I think, are going to be right at the front of that conversation, because we know the dangers of new technologies, right? And again, while this, genuinely is in my opinion, revolutionary technology, it's not all that different from, other technologies that we've had. I mean, like, you can go back 30 years or 40 years and say, okay, like, well, we went from a, extremely mainframe based, computing processing. Then we had distributed computing, right? And personal computers became a thing. And so, like, we've gone through many, kind of large leaps in technology. I think this is definitely going to be one of them. But we have a good amount of security folks now that can contemplate some of these things and say, listen, here's where we can see this going wrong, because we've seen it go wrong in the past, and maybe start to take some proactive steps against that.
Got it. Wow, that was detailed. All right. So another thing is around how a lot of ransomware gangs are getting a reputation of being reliable. I remember we were on a conference pretty recently, and then there was a couple of slides about Black Hat, Alf, or who else? Black Hat, Alf, and Clock, or these guys, Lockbit 3.0. These guys have a reputation of releasing data as soon as the ransom is paid. So there is this dark, the dark web has a reputation of being reliable as well. And then this basically began with a question that we always thought: do never pay ransom, because you don't trust criminals. But then now there is an organizational structure that's coming in where it's basically built on reputation. One of the things is whenever a ransomware attack happened, companies went back and or probably if a company was attacked, they went back to the previous victim to check what exactly happened and how the transaction was like. A lot of the times, the previous victims are watching for it. That's yeah, they paid the money, we paid the money, they gave us the data back. There was no problem. It was a great deal. So this is becoming a bigger problem than how much, and then there's not a lot of conversation about it.
I don't know that it's becoming a bigger problem. It's been a problem for a while, and it's a thorn in a lot of people's side. Um, I heard a good talk probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, from one of the lead scientists, data scientists at McAfee, and they talked about the No More Ransom project. I don't know if you're familiar. It's nomoreransom.org.
Okay.
And basically, it's a consortium of different contributors, mostly private. I believe there is some government, affiliations, but it's not, directly funded by any government source. Um, in my opinion, the only way that we make ransomware become less of a problem is for people to stop paying the ransoms. That's because as soon as you make it an ineffective business model, they're cooked. They're not going to invest the time anymore. And so rather than us as information security professionals chasing data that we lost or put us in a bad light, I think we have to get to a point where as a society, we say, hey, you know what? Computer security is hard, and sometimes we screw up. And, when it happens, be forthright about it, right? Rather than trying to hide behind it and say, oh, we had an incident, but, we don't want to talk about what happened or whatever. There's no company today that won't, at some point in their, history, experience some type of breach, right? It could be something as simple as a phishing email or something far more complex, state-sponsored attack that, they get totally owned, right? And then everywhere, somewhere in between. So it has become a very lucrative business because businesses pay. It's the fastest way out of the problem. And now, we're seeing too, cybersecurity insurance companies have special carve outs for ransomware, right? And they'll say we won't cover it, or we'll cover up to X number of dollars, but you must prove that you have these types of protections in place. And I think that is actually the way to drive the right behavior, is to start to incentivize people to say, listen, don't have all of your data in one spot. Have multiple backup, tiers, such that, even if you get a ransomware attack, you have all of your data in a second location. If you incentivize people to do the behavior that's going to prevent them from being totally screwed in the first place when they get attacked by a ransomware group, then they're going to be way less incentivized to just pay the ransom. And so I think, and again, you can ask who is going to drive that revolution. Well, I think the cybersecurity insurance companies are actually going to be probably one of the biggest influencers there, because they're going to say, listen, we're going to cap your liability at $100,000, right? Like any damages above that, we're not going to pay out. Unless you have X, Y, and Z in place, and you can prove to us that you have redundant systems and ways to address ransomware. And I think, again, just like any technology, it's one of those things where it's ubiquitous enough now that everybody should have a ransomware plan. A lot of companies don't, but they should.
Okay. Okay. So, lastly, I think just how exactly do you think these guys are also going to leverage AI, and then how is the attack surface? How will the attack surface be probably in the next 5 years? What do you see it changing?
Yeah. So I saw a presentation probably I don't know, three to 6 months ago. And the somebody had done basically a proof of concept using VirusTotal. Are you familiar with VirusTotal?
Yes.
So you can go and upload a malware sample, and it tells you if it's a piece of malware or not. So basically, what they did was they took I think it was actually ChatGPT in this case. They took ChatGPT and created a malicious, or took a known malicious file. I don't remember what the particular virus was. It was fairly innocuous, but very easily detectable. And then they had ChatGPT go and modify the code, rebuild it, and then submit it to VirusTotal. And the algorithm basically created permutations, enough permutations such that it would no longer be detected by VirusTotal, right? So it changed the heuristics of the file enough that it was no longer able to be detected. To me, that is the crux of the problem that we're about to face, right? We are now, algorithms are going to be weaponized in such a way that they can evolve faster than we can detect them, right? And so I think one of the things that us as a society are going to have to start to do is, and it's funny where different intersection points, I've heard from many college professors that they have struggled in the last year of detecting excuse me, papers and articles and things that were written by students,
Right.
whether or not it was written by an algorithm. So I think what we're going to have to do is create better detection measures, right? To be able to recognize when something is created by an algorithm, because ultimately we're going to face weaponized algorithms that, unless we can easily detect the patterns, we're not going to be able to keep up, right? We're going to have viruses that can evolve faster than we can write definitions for them. And that's going to be a big problem. Now, on the flip side of it, you can also start to see, well, now I can actually do the inverse of that and start to say, listen, I can use those same algorithms to try to train a defense against that,
Right.
right?
What
But
was
what was that?
are we looking at that?
Yeah, well, so I think it's interesting because we're going to get in a spot where the bad guys are always one step ahead of the good guys, always, right?
Okay.
Somebody always figures out how to do something bad with the technology before they figure out how to do something that's truly good.
Right.
And so I think now the race will be on to figure out how we can start as security professionals to leverage AI in a way that we can be proactive and use it as a defensive mechanism, rather than just having to be responsive to the fact that somebody is going to figure out how to weaponize it. And back to the earlier point, somebody they have detection tools that you can go and like run somebody's paper through or article through, and it will say, like, with 99% confidence we believe this was written by AI. Well, those two have their intrinsic limits. I saw somebody went and took the US Constitution and ran it through, and it said with like 99.5% confidence this was written by AI. Obviously not. But that speaks to the exact nature of the problem, because at the end of the day, it's all algorithms. It's just pattern recognition. And so what we have to do is get better at the pattern recognition, in understanding that no technology is going to be perfect, but we have to start trying. Otherwise, we're going to be so far behind that the bad guys will forever stay ahead.
Wow, Ryan, that was amazing. A great conversation. And also, I didn't know we were running actually low on time. In fact, I think the time's kind of up.
Yeah, not
I
a
can
problem.
I kind of have like another 5 or 6 questions, but I think we'll probably have to postpone it for some other time. So if you are available, so basically we can look at another possibility where we could also collaborate on another research piece or an article or things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, for me, I love taking the time to do these type of interactions. Honestly, if we don't socialize these problems, if we just try to go off and solve them in a vacuum of our own, we're never going to be successful, right?
Right.
So ultimately, taking the time to talk about them and to get the problems out in the open and socialize them, that's the only way that we're going to be able to solve them. So yes, I would be happy to take some more time in the future and
Great,
do another
great.
interview or collaborate. You let me know
Really,
when.
really appreciate that. All
You're
right.
most welcome.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And again, congratulations for being one of the top 50 CISOs, or one of an amazing CISOs, basically.
Oh, thank you. I
And,
very much appreciate that.
and yes, and then let's stay in touch. Again, amazing to have you. Really big fan of your work. I think all of our team is so. So hi from the team, and great work. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Have a great one.
Bye bye.